God didn't tell Abraham what he was supposed to do till he was 75. Like, Abraham was 75 years old when God said, hey, I need you to go to the land of Canaan, and started that journey with him as far as showing him what his purpose was going to be. Sometimes we want somebody to have it all together by 30 when that's just not realistic. If COVID taught us anything, it's that you don't know what the future holds. There's not somebody, I haven't heard one interview, seen one article yet where somebody said, I prophesied, I guaranteed that 2020 COVID was going to happen. You know what we heard when COVID happened, or before COVID happened, in January 2020, when everybody was doing their watch night services and New Year's Eve services, all I heard was 2020, your vision going to be clearer than ever. I declare. Like, that's all you heard. If you go back and listen to them New Year's Eve services, you heard that 2020 was going to be your best year yet. And we all know it was far from that for many people. So I think we just have to be careful when it comes to purpose, that we have the right intention in mind. What's up, fam? Welcome back to our channel. My name is Tim. This is my beautiful wife, Pauline, and you're tuning in to an episode of the W Podcast, where you get wisdom and a word with the
Wheelers.
Hey, so we are so excited to have y'all in this week. We're doing a rapid fire Q&A type episode, so we got a few different questions that didn't necessarily have enough meat, we felt like, in order to do a whole episode, but we still love to be able to answer the questions that you all send in. So we're hoping that this will suffice. Rapid fire, we're going to go through them, knock them out, and at the end of the day, it's going to be a great episode for you to continue to grow in this love journey of yours. So, can you read the first question?
Absolutely. Am I wrong for not wanting to date someone I have to help build up spiritually? Examples: beg them to go to church, constantly remind them that being baptized is important and they should flee from sin, etc. I believe that the man God has for me will already be walking in his purpose and be in alignment with God and following him.
Thanks for reading that, babe. And thank you for whoever submitted that question. Let me just say right off the bat, you are not wrong for wanting a man who knows the basics of the faith. I feel like that's kind of what this is saying.
Not even just knows them, but walks them out, practices them.
Being baptized, going to church, fleeing from sin. I mean, that's just like basic stuff. And it's not just a man problem. Like, there's plenty of women who are not doing those things as well. And if you're somebody who is engaged in your faith and trying your best to live it out for God, no, you shouldn't essentially missionary date in a way. What does missionary date mean, since you shook your head?
I think, well, I guess that's the thing, is what's the definition? But I wouldn't say this is, from what this very brief information given, I wouldn't say this is missionary dating in the sense that, like, I want to win him to Christ or win her to Christ. I think it's more of like,
but it's teaching
somebody who believes in Christ but is not fully surrendered. It's not seeking him.
So it sounds like they need to be one too. But I feel you. So I would highly encourage you to not do that. But what I do want to say, that last sentence that this person wrote, I believe that the man God has for me will already be walking in his purpose and be in alignment with God and following him. That's where I think we can get a little tricky when we're saying, I want a man who is already in his purpose. Because what does that mean? Like, what does it mean? I feel like that's such a cliche topic nowadays in the church. Like, I got to find my purpose. And I felt that way when I first got saved as well. Like, I was super pressed, like crying out, Lord, please tell me what my purpose is. Because I didn't know. And I was just out here floundering and not sure. And one of the things that was so helpful for me before I really felt like God made it super clear what he wanted me to do was coming to the realization that every Christian has the same purpose at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Which is to live for Christ and to make disciples.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, no matter who you are, that is what you are supposed to do as a Christian. And I think sometimes we get caught up in, oh, well, he needs to be this and he needs to be that. And we forget that God didn't tell Abraham what he was supposed to do till he was 75. Like, Abraham was 75 years old when God said, hey, I need you to go to the land of Canaan, and started that journey with him as far as showing him what his purpose was going to be. Sometimes we want somebody to have it all together by 30 when that's just not realistic. If COVID taught us anything, it's that you don't know what the future holds. There's not somebody, I haven't heard one interview, seen one article yet where somebody said, I prophesied, I guaranteed that 2020, COVID was going to happen. You know what we heard when COVID happened, or before COVID happened, in January 2020, when everybody was doing their watch night services and New Year's Eve services, all I heard was 2020, your vision going to be clearer than ever. I declare. Like, that's all you heard. If you go back and listen to them New Year's Eve services, you heard that 2020 was going to be your best year yet. And we all know it was far from that for many people. So I think we just have to be careful when it comes to purpose, that we have the right intention in mind. Now, I agree that you want a man to be in alignment with God, but God orders our steps. So that means that as long as the man is walking and taking the next step that God has for him, that should be a great place for you to start with a man.
Yeah.
That's my initial thoughts. You go.
I agree. I don't know that that's who she's dating, though.
I don't think she's dating anybody. I didn't read this as I have a boyfriend. I read this as
not one date.
Yeah, am I wrong for having these standards of I'm not going to date somebody who doesn't know getting baptized is a good idea?
Okay, I guess just the very specific examples, begging them to go to church constantly. It just sounds like this is something that's actually going on in her life.
See, that's the beauty of the W podcast. There's two people who you read it differently, and I be reading differently sometimes.
Yeah. So in that case, because the last sentence I agree is kind of like a different question or a different like perspective in a way. Because it's like, if this is the case, then like, why are you with this guy? Because it sounds like, you know what you want, and it sounds like he's not it. And if that's the case, then yeah, why are you with him? And there's usually people give like, oh, like, the bad and the good together. Like, I'm kind of conflicted, but there doesn't seem to be any of that. So maybe you're all right, where it's kind of this someone's telling her,
say that again,
she's too picky or something like that.
Yeah.
Like, somebody has a friend that they want to hook her up with, but she's like, from what I've seen, that's not going to work for me. So yeah, I agree. You're definitely not wrong. I mean, at the end of the day, you want to be equally yoked, and you want somebody who is going to, not only that you're challenging them, but they're challenging you. And that can come up in, like, you guys are being challenged in different seasons and different ways, in different areas of your life and your relationship with God. Maybe you have a great love for God's presence and you're a worshiper, and that's something you love to do, and you kind of have a knack for that. And maybe he has a knack for God's word, and you guys can spur each other on and challenge each other in that. But in those examples, there has to be a desire on both sides. You should never be, if you're the worshiper, you should never be pulling your boyfriend or your girlfriend, into like, come on, you gotta come worship more with me. Like, you don't worship enough. Show me how you worship. Kind of like a performance judgment type of thing. It should be something like, wow, like, you seem to be so free in God's presence and really enjoy worshiping. Like, I would love to grow in that. I would love to worship with you. I would love to just kind of spend time in God's presence with you, and just to get more exposure to that, and vice versa with the Bible reading. It shouldn't be something like, oh, how many Bible verses do you know memorized? Oh, I know more than you, need to get your weight up, type of thing. So if that's not the case, if there's not a desire to grow on either side, then that's where my kind of concern would be, versus like, oh, I've been going to church longer than this person, I'm more involved, like, they're just not on my level. I think, you are got to be honest with yourself. A lot of times you say, like, oh, someone's not on my level or not, like, that's okay. But also at the same time, if you're crying out to God for a boyfriend, for a girlfriend, and there's been signs that the Lord is pointing you to somebody, like, that was kind of the story with me and Tim, not on a spiritual level that he wasn't on my level, but for me, it was like, oh, he's 11 months younger than me. Like, okay, he's still in college. Like, how could that person be for me? And I got humbled real quick by, somebody that was in my life that I looked up to, and she was like, you just got out of college yourself, like a couple months ago? And he'll be out of college soon. Like, in the grand scheme of life, and 30, 40 years from now, it won't matter. And she's absolutely right. It doesn't even matter 10 years later. So I think that you kind of have to zoom out, and this is the beauty of having community in your life and in your dating story, because if somebody does keep coming up as a suggestion, or the Lord keeps putting them on your heart, and you're kind of like, I mean, yeah, but no, like, I like this part of them, but not this other part. Like, bring that to your community and get their feedback. And they may say, girl, yeah, I've heard lots of things. Move on. Or they'll say, he's actually such a nice guy. He's just in between jobs or whatever the case is. Like, he has such a heart for God, such a heart for people. Very kind, very respectful, good reputation. Like, those are the things that you want to hear about a man and a woman too.
Yeah, love that. All right, rapid fire. What's the next question?
Okay. I would like to ask advice. And I just realized you were trying to, skirt me on, but it's okay.
Read the question.
Yeah. I would like to ask advice how we should build our friendship that leads to marriage from a biblical perspective. I don't even know what the process of getting married entails. Is a Christian wedding and church ceremony required or mandatory? So this person is must have been the same grammar class you were in, which is just one run-on sentence.
Wow. So I'm not even going to address that. So to break this down, the person said, how do you build a strong friendship? And then they said, I don't even know the process of getting married. Do you need to have a wedding and a church ceremony if you're a Christian? Is that mandatory? So I'm going to answer both questions. As far as building a friendship, we've talked about that on several other podcasts. Maybe we can link some that you can watch the full episode in total. But in short, one of the best things you can do is to talk early and often. So the more you talk, the more you get to know somebody. Out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. Like, you need to get somebody talking. I remember we had a meeting with our pastor years ago. And he said whenever he has sit-down meetings with somebody, he tries not to talk that much. He just tries to get them to talk. I don't know if you remember him saying that, but he just likes to get them to talk. Because eventually, if he gets them talking,
it's coming out.
They're going to say what the real is, what the truth is. So the more you can get your partner talking about their hopes, their dreams, their fears, their concerns, the better you can get to know that person. And then think about it. I've said this before, but everything you know about Jesus, everything you know about God, he told you in his word. So we don't know anybody unless they tell us who they are. And talking and communicating is a great way to do that. So obviously that means over the phone. But one of the things I love that Pauline and I did, and we've said it before too, is we tried to talk on every different, or communicate on every different type of platform that we could. So obviously we talked to the phone, we texted, we'd be DMing on LinkedIn during the workday, we would be DMing on Instagram or whatever social media platform there is, just trying to connect, just trying to speak to one another. And that, I believe, really helped us build our friendship when we were dating.
Yeah, you want them to know what makes you laugh. You want to know what makes them laugh. You obviously want to have, deeper conversations about what they believe, about their past, about their dreams, all those things. But we're also just talking, this person asked for advice to build a friendship that leads to marriage, which from a biblical perspective is kind of like a very layered question here. Friendship, I think, is something that has to come from like pure interest and commitment. And as an adult, friendship's a little bit trickier because it's not convenient, so that commitment's even more important. You can meet somebody that you like as a friend, platonic or otherwise, but if you're not committed to somehow consistently getting to know them, it's going to be really hard to call it a friendship. It's just probably just some nice person you met a couple times at something. And build more memories together if you're really trying to build a friendship. So, like, maybe you met at work. Well, maybe, and because you guys don't work on the same team, maybe you make a habit of, like, hey, let's go get coffee every Thursday, and creating memories that way. Oh, would you like to come to this? I have tickets to this game. Would you like to come with me? You have to be intentional about that and be committed, probably for several months, before you can really call somebody your friend. Now, this is somebody, it sounds like you want to be their friend so that you can date them. I think if you're kind of at that stage already, it kind of depends on who you are, but I feel like the older you are, the less time you have to play games. So if you are not already friends and you want to date them, I think you should just say that. Just say, like, I would like to get to know you better, and the friendship will grow. as you continue to date and get to know each other. But I think it's just hard to kind of play like, and then you end up getting yourself friend zoned and you didn't mean to if you're not really, upfront about your intentions. So just be careful about that. From a biblical perspective, I mean, I just think about God's, again, his commitment to us, and then also Jonathan and David's commitment to each other. We're talking about biblical friendship. That's obviously not one that leads to anything romantic, but I think that, as an adult, it's very easy to just cut people off because it's not convenient to keep friendships. The older you get, the more responsibilities you add to your plate. So if you really want to be a friend, you have to be committed to it through ups and downs, through offense, through disappointment. I don't know what the second part of this question, I don't even know what the process of getting married entails as a Christian. This is a really good and honest just perspective because, not everybody, forget Christian, like, dating and wedding marriage process. Like some people, like, they've never been to a wedding. Their people in their family don't get married, and it's just, some people come from families, aunts and uncles are not married, parents are not married. It's just not something that they're super familiar with. And then, like, the marriages or that they are familiar with around them, they don't know that intimately or don't know that well. So you don't need, it's kind of like when you're the first person to go to college, in your family, it's like, I don't know. My parents don't know how to walk me through this application process, and you need help from a guidance counselor, which is totally okay. And if that is you, like, kudos to you. That's amazing. To be the first person in your family to really take marriage seriously and want to do it God's way. And I think that there's nothing wrong with that. That's something that, the Lord is proud of and that we're proud of too. I think that it's the best way that you can do that biblically is what I said in the last question, which is to involve community. Don't make major decisions by yourself. The Bible always talks about, especially in Proverbs, about how easy it is to make mistakes when you make decisions by yourself. So especially when it comes to choosing a partner, if you're worried about kind of like the wedding process, marriage process, whatever, involve couples that are further ahead in the process than you are and get advice from them and take their advice, listen to their advice. As far as the wedding goes, biblical and Christian Christ-centered marriages are way more important than Christ-centered weddings. But Christ-centered weddings are great too because God loves to celebrate. So I'm not saying skip the wedding, but I think just do whatever you can within your means at that time. As far as keeping it Christ-centered, it's very easy to do. We had communion at our weddings. We worshiped at our wedding. There's a lot of really, like, just simple, sweet, beautiful things to keep Christ at the center of your wedding. But the marriage is the most important thing.
So to answer your question specifically, because you said, as a Christian, is a wedding and church ceremony required or mandatory? And a wedding and church ceremony is absolutely not required. There was plenty of people who got married and there was no mention of a wedding. If you think about in Genesis 24:67, it says, "And Isaac brought Rebekah into his mother's, Sarah's tent, and she became his wife." Now, what does that mean? Well, you tell me. If you brought somebody into your tent and they became your wife, what does that mean? A lot of times in the Bible, not a lot of times, in the Bible, consummation of the marriage by sex was how someone became married. Because if you think about it back, it's supposed to be like this now, but 2024, it's really hard to find two virgins to getting married. A lot of times in the Bible, what would happen is two virgins would get together, they would have sex, and on the sheet of the marriage bed that you made love in, it was going to be red because there was going to be blood that came from that first time of having
the hymen being broken.
Yes. So thank you for the technical term.
Anatomical, yeah. You're welcome.
So when that happened, you get that red sheet. A lot of times people get in trouble. There's verses in the Bible where the guys would be like, "Hey, this woman wasn't a virgin," because you could get in some serious trouble if your daughter was married and they found out that she wasn't a virgin, and then they would be like, hey, bring that sheet out. Hey,
That was the proof.
They just did something. And then if it was red, they was good. If it wasn't red, there was some problems. So long story short, that's really what you need. Now, 2024, I would say that you at least should get somebody to legally marry you, go to the courthouse or something. So at least make sure you get those marriage papers. Like, that's just officially go through the process. I think about when they came to Jesus and they were like, hey, like, do you believe in paying taxes? And Jesus was like, give to Caesar what is his, give to God what is his. Why am I bringing that up? Because sometimes we can get super spiritual. Well, why do I need a piece of paper if I'm going to get married, if it's just between me and God? And it's like, well, just do what is legally required here. Because also that would just protect you from a practical standpoint. There's things that come from being married that you get with that piece of paper. So take care of that. It doesn't have to be something expensive, like Pauline said. It could just be a courthouse or something simple. But if you do want to go the route of having a wedding, absolutely, feel free to do it. His first recorded miracle was at a wedding. Yeah. So that's totally fine. But it's certainly not required or mandatory. Now, Pauline wanted me to read something. Why don't you just go ahead and read it? Yeah,
so it's interesting you brought up consummating the marriage because, and it's I know people don't like this in day and age today, but consummating means to make a marriage or relationship complete by having sexual intercourse. So a lot of times what that really means, what I take that as, is you are married to every person you have sex with. So you're not married until you have sex. And that's why, people kind of emphasize the weight and the importance of the wedding night and consummating the marriage, the day you have your ceremony, because that's what makes you married. A lot of times the wedding ceremony is, yes, it's between God, you the couple, and God, but also the witnesses that are there, and then, the legal aspect of it is taken care of that day as well. And then but you're not really married until you have sex. So that's why, again, it's important to keep the Lord's standards, and, why God reserves sex for marriage, because there is that spiritual oneness and that physical oneness that only happens in sex. And then you're not, because the sex part kind of just completes the oneness. Okay, now you're legally one, you're physically one, you're one in a community, there's a body of witnesses that has, said amen and has seen you all come together emotionally, but now is your time to come together and become one physically. And every time you have sex in your marriage, it only strengthens that bond and that oneness in your union.
Now, I know some people were looking at you crazy when you said every time you have sex, you're essentially getting married to that person. Now, let me just give you some Bible from that, because y'all not going to be coming at my baby like that. She know what she's talking about. So 1 Corinthians 6:16 says, and don't you realize that if a man joins himself to a prostitute, he becomes one body with her? For the scriptures say the two are united into one. Now, that being said, the amazing thing about Jesus is that if we repent and turn from our ways, that his grace is good enough to wash us white as snow. So just know that the Lord can redeem you if that is your situation, and maybe even you'll still be able to see that blood on the sheet when it's your turn to get married. Now, let's move on to the last question, rapid fire. Let's try to make this one faster.
Yeah, please. Our rapid fire's not so fast. Okay. How do I continue to date or court my boyfriend as a teen or legal adult to become married when we're long distance?
Yeah, so thank you for the question. I don't think age matters at all when it comes to dating long distance and getting married. And I just want anybody who's watching this right now who may be in a long distance relationship to understand, because I think sometimes you can feel like you're at a disadvantage because you don't see them all the time in person, and it may feel like you're not connected with them in the same way that other people are dating. Maybe you can't go out on a Friday night and watch a movie with them. Does anybody ever still go to the movies? But you can't do things with them.
All these streaming networks.
Right. And there's some advantages to being long distance. The first one is obvious, right? There's less temptation on a weekly basis for physical temptation or sexual temptation. Now, obviously, when you do see each other, maybe there's a heightened sense for those days and moments that you're together. But on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis, You don't have that. Now, the second thing, which is even more valuable in my opinion, is you really have a great opportunity to build a strong emotional intimacy with the person you're dating if you're long distance. Because all you have to rely on to help you get closer to that person is the emotional connection. You don't have hand holding. You don't have kissing. Like, there's not that physical element that can oftentimes be a distraction in the dating phase. Mm-hmm. All you got is talking on the phone. All you got is texting. All you got is connecting in means outside of physical touch. And that's the stuff that's going to help you, honestly, longer term when you do get married, because you're going to step into that wedding day knowing that person on a deeper level than somebody that spent more time making out than they did talking about real stuff.
Honestly.
So don't be discouraged if you're long distance. It actually sets you up in a better way most times
if you do
when it comes to marriage.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And we actually have some long distance questions. I think they're available on our website. If they are, I'll link them. So if you're interested in that and you want to know how do I thrive in the long distance phase, we have some resources that may help you with that. But I will say, last thing, because it's supposed to be quick, make sure you get them around your family and close friends as much as possible. So obviously you're not going to see them every day, every week, but whenever they're around you, whenever they come to visit you, whenever you go to visit them, please be intentional about surrounding them and making sure you're surrounded around people that they trust and they love and they know, because you're going to want those people to be able to speak into your relationship and see you all together and make sure everything is on the up and up and that this person ain't crazy.
Yes.
Let's go ahead.
Incorporating that wisdom and community. Yeah, I mean, the only thing that I'm wondering is, like, I'm trying to read between the lines here, is like, you know, continuing to date, that makes me think that there are some roadblocks that are coming up as a teen or legal adult, which was interesting. That means you're 18 or 19. I'm guessing there's like some money or like budgeting things coming up that are making your relationship hard, being long distance, because, you know, if someone lives on the East Coast, someone lives on the West Coast, it's going to be really hard to see each other some type of regular basis. We know couples who, when they were dating, they would switch off every other month, like who would visit who. So they were seeing each other every month, but they would switch off, you know, who was traveling. And that obviously helps split the costs. But, you know, you'll need a means to do that just to begin with. And if you were in college, I know I didn't have any money
with
in
this
college.
Inflation?
Yeah.
You want me traveling?
Yeah. So, and obviously when you're 18, 19, you know, don't have the most amount of money most of the time. So it can be really hard to, you know, thinking about sustaining a relationship if you're like, okay, I don't know when we're going to get married, maybe 3, 4, or 5 more years of this, and I don't have money to make this relationship, you know, work from what people are telling me I need to do or whatever. Because long distance is obviously a challenge, and it is even more challenging if you don't have a lot of resources. So I don't know if that's the angle that you're coming at, because I'm kind of like, continue today, like, what's the problem? Why would you stop dating if there's no issues? Because that's all you're giving me was your guys' age range and the fact that you want to date to marry, and then your long distance. So I'm just going to assume it's money stuff. If you can take turns, obviously that should help. One person shouldn't just be coming to the other person the whole time. If there's a way that somebody can stay with a family member to reduce costs and not like spend money on hotels, and then reduce the temptation of staying together in the same roof, that would be a possibility. And then also you're killing 2 birds with 1 stone with them, or you getting to know their family better by staying with one of them. If that's not an option, or if that's not, you know, working out, I do think that there are more kind of like serious conversations, especially if you're talking about, you know, dating to marry, about like, what's our plan? Because I don't think that anybody is really meant to stay away from somebody that they love for years and years. It's really, really, really difficult to do, because you're either growing apart or you're growing close together. Of course, you can grow close together being, you know, having those emotional conversations and staying connected and all of that. But I know one of the things that long distance couples struggle with is like feeling isolated. It's like, you know, in order for me to be close to my partner, I'm away from my community. You know, I can't bring my boyfriend out to birthday parties and gatherings and outings and things like that with my people because he's not here. And like, you know, to be with them means being apart and not being on FaceTime with him. So it is this big balance. That's why it's great, you know, and it is important to prioritize seeing each other as much as possible. But there definitely needs to be a plan. If you guys go to 2 different schools, you know, how long are you going to be in this school? You know, if, you know, it's not ridiculous at all, especially if you're talking about you're a legal adult, to, you know, talk about when realistically can we get married. And if you guys are at that point, if you are with this person, you know that this is who you want to marry, you know this is who God has for you, I would still start having those conversations, just because long distance is not sustainable for anyone at any age, with any amount of resources. And it's even harder if you're putting more and more of those kind of risk factors together of being young and then not having resources. So if like somebody's in med school and it's going to be a while until school's out of the picture, like people get married in med school all the time before med school. People do get married in undergrad. It's more of a conversation with your parents and like, you know, how supportive are they? Are they going to, you know, if they're paying for you to go to school, are they going to cut you off if you get married? Those types of conversations. But because I don't have the context of like how long you guys have been together and how far apart are you guys and like what's really going on, it's hard to say. But I agree with what you said, that like, you know, just because your age, if you're younger and then you're in long distance, it really does not change the rules or change the wisdom. It doesn't change God's wisdom for relationships. So you do have to get more creative, trying to find some other couples who have successfully done what you're trying to do, of being long distance and being younger, and getting wisdom from them about like practical solutions. And then, you know, at the end of the day, it's all about being committed and being willing to sacrifice. You do probably feel like you have to sacrifice more than your friends or in relationships because you're long distance, but that's kind of part of the game and part of, you know, your cross to bear, so to say, for this season, for this stage of life. It's not forever. And I think that kind of establishing some type of plan. I know for me, how I work as a female, having a plan of like, all right, 6 more months of this, 1 more year of that, gives me hope. We were talking about that earlier today, of like how it's important to have hope, because that's how our faith is kind of cultivated. So I think that if you need to have that conversation of like, what's our plan, instead of just like, okay, we're just doing this endlessly, I don't know what's going on. And obviously, you know, you gotta approach your boyfriend with some type of definitely with respect and with grace, because he's, you know, probably trying to figure out everything as well. But yeah, that's what I would say to that.
Yeah, that's great. So we hope you really enjoyed this episode. We covered a lot of different topics. It's always good to switch it up and answer as many questions as we can. We'll see y'all next week on the W Podcast. Thanks for watching this video.
To get more Christian relationship advice, subscribe to our channel.
And make sure you check out our other videos as well.